So for those of you who don't, wow. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel. I'm a Mitra who's training for ordination. And tonight, Paul and I are leading the evening, and Paul is also a Mitra training for ordination, and he's online. Can you wave, Paul? Look that way. Yeah. So, and the topic that we're talking about tonight is this idea of bearing witness. Bearing witness. And it was Paul's idea. And as soon as he said it to me, I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. So it just really, it seemed to fit really well for both of us. And I think we're going to be, in a way, looking at it from slightly different angles. So I think there's so many ways you could look at bearing witness. But yeah, you'll see kind of the different ways we'll be looking at it. Yeah. So I think what I'll do, actually, is get started with the meditation because, I would have finished a little bit earlier to leave a little bit more time for the tea break so that people here can have at least 15 minutes for a tea break. So I'll have a bit more time there. So we'll go ahead and get started, I think. So the first thing I want to say, well, actually, let me talk about the meditation a bit, what I'm going to do tonight, because it's a bit different. So I'm not going to lead the metta bhavana or the mindfulness of breathing. I'm going to lead a just sitting practice. So you may or may not have done just sitting before. I'll lead us through it because there's a particular kind of flavor to it that I'd like to bring. But it goes with the theme tonight for me of bearing witness. So there's both internal and external parts of that, I think. And just sitting is a practice where we're really bearing witness to our own experience and whatever that is, and really allowing and being with that. So that's what I'll be doing, what I'll be leading us through. And I think a really important part of that I've found in my practice is kindness. So in a way, it is just sitting, but bringing metta to it makes such a difference. So I really want to emphasize that. So, and from the very beginning, actually, to start before we start meditating, I just would really encourage you to make sure you've got everything you need to be as comfortable as you can to meditate. So, if an extra blanket or an extra cushion or something would be helpful for you now, as it would for me, actually. I'm going to go grab Holly's going to grab me a blanket. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. What's that? Yeah, a cushion for my feet would be great. Thank you. So I really encourage you. Once I was on a retreat where the leader said, make a bit of a fuss of yourself. Thank you. That's great. And just really make sure that you've got what you need to be comfortable. Yeah. So as I said, I'll lead us through the whole thing. And I'm going to finish with a poem that I'll talk a bit more about later. So you'll know when the poem starts that the meditation's almost over. Okay. Okay. So just getting into your posture for meditation. Really taking time to settle. Just really letting your body settle into whatever's supporting you. Having a sense of your body, how it feels right now. Sense of your weight being supported. Really letting your weight go. Feeling that support from underneath you. And along with that support that you let in, just checking, looking for any pleasant sensations in the body. It could just be a bit of warmth in your hands, a bit of relaxation in your leg. Something simple and pleasant. It's really taking time to let that in. And as we go through the practice, if it becomes difficult at any point, just turning back to that pleasant sensation or a new pleasant sensation. Just letting yourself rest in that, if it would be helpful at any point. And beginning to open, just opening up to anything in your body that's calling for your attention. Just turning towards that part, that sensation, as much kindness, softness as you can. And just noticing how that is. Continuing to broaden your awareness. To allow in other sensations, perhaps sounds, smells, whatever you can see, if your eyes are closed or open. Just allowing those sensations to come to you. Just allowing whatever draws your attention, whether it's a sound, feeling, allowing that to be known in awareness. Or simply known. And allowing the next moment to arrive. Continuing to allow your experience to be as it is. Very relaxed way, a very sort of sitting back kind of energy. Sitting back, seeing what's happening now. If you have thoughts going through your mind, noticing those as well. Just noticing what the thoughts feel like. And remembering if it ever becomes overwhelming or simply finding it difficult, just coming back to pleasant sensation or to the feel of your sitting bones on the seat beneath you. Just sitting back in awareness, noticing what's happening now. And how are you relating to what's happening now? Just noticing if there's any pushing away happening, any clinging on to parts of your experience. Just simply noticing. So what's calling your attention now? Sometimes the mountain is hidden from me in veils of cloud. Sometimes I am hidden from the mountain in veils of inattention, apathy, fatigue, when I forget or refuse to go down to the shore or a few yards up the road on a clear day to reconfirm that witnessing presence. Okay, so I set a timer for myself as well. That's so encouraging when that comes on. Okay. Lovely. Yeah, so I'm talking about bearing witness tonight. And I think there's, as I said earlier, there's sort of two different takes that Paul and I will be taking. And I'm going to be looking a bit more at bearing witness in terms of the difficult things that we bear witness to in our lives, both internally and externally. I think Paul will be looking a bit more at the wonderful things that we also can bear witness to. So we'll be ending on a high note, as Paul. But yeah, bearing witness to me means really seeing reality, difficult and wonderful parts. And then bearing both of those, yeah, so actually bearing to be with them. And then the third part I want to look at is also sort of, it's about then witnessing that. So it's about standing firmly in that and sharing that with others, and about a very honest way or something, like opening to others with it. Yeah, so 3 different parts. So the first to me, to be able to bear witness at all, it starts with being able to see, right? Just being able to see in the first place. And that involves letting the world in a certain way. It involves certain vulnerability in a way. It involves letting the world affect us and allowing a connection. So I have a story, a pretty good story, I think, of when I really couldn't see. And this was about 8 months ago, I realized when I looked at it. I wouldn't have thought it was that long ago, but story when my son, I needed to take my 14-year-old son for a PCR test because he had a fever. And so I was scared. I was worried that he had COVID. And I think I didn't quite realize quite how anxious I was. And I was also anxious, and maybe I moved some of that anxiety onto just the process of getting this PCR test. Like I had to have his passport, and I had to have the code of our booking and all this stuff that I needed to have. Anyway, so I drove him to this place, and it was a drive-through testing place, and there's a woman standing outside the car, and I knew I wasn't supposed to roll my window down because I'd been there before for something else. And so the window's up, and she's outside, and she's holding this thing. It's like a black thing. It's rectangular. It's about this big, and it's got a number written on it. It's an 11-digit number, sort of 5 digits and then 6 digits. And above that, it says security check or something. She's holding this thing, and she's pointing at it. She's pointing at my phone, and she's pointing at this number. I think maybe you guys see what I should have seen at the time. So I was just flabbergasted. What does she want me to do? I was like, I don't know. She's also speaking, which you could hear through the thing, but I couldn't hear. I was so in my zone of this is going to be really difficult. I need to do the right thing. And anyway, I pulled out my son's passport. I was like, you want to see my son's passport? And I held this up. She's like, no, she just keeps pointing back at this thing. And then I was, do you need to see my booking? I was holding all these things up. And the best part, though, was when I thought maybe she needed me to scan a QR code. There's no QR code inside. Anyway, I took out my phone and I took a picture of her. Yeah, because I also don't know how to scan QR codes. But anyway, so that happened. I still have that picture. So anyway, this woman was very lovely. She was very patient, and she just, eventually, though, she sort of realized that I wasn't going to be able to see or hear what was going on. So she walked around the car to my son, and she said through the window, "Tell your mom to call this number." Yeah. So yeah, so I did, and that was much easier because then we could just talk on the phone. But yeah. So anyway. My son loves that story, and we've told that story a lot since then. But I love that story too, actually, because I find it really helpful, kind of light reminder of how easy it is to just to lose the plot, to just sort of not see what's right in front of me. Yeah. So what gets in the way of seeing? And I guess in that moment, fear got in the way. My anxiety got in the way. I think that was a big piece of it. There was this ego clinging as well. There was this like, I need to do this process right, and how am I going to do it? And there was some fixed views about how things were going to be. Like I thought this was going to be a difficult process, so yeah. So I think some of those things got in the way. And then what helps us to see, and I guess again in that situation, sitting back would have helped. Being relaxed, sort of sitting back, allowing things to come to me. Allowing to listen, to hear what she had to say, to see the number in front of me that looked a lot like a phone number. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just going to read that poem again that I read during the meditation. It's by Denise Levertov, and it's called Witness. Sometimes the mountain is hidden from me in veils of cloud. Sometimes I am hidden from the mountain in veils of inattention, apathy, fatigue. When I forget or refuse to go down to the shore or a few yards up the road on a clear day to reconfirm that witnessing presence. Yeah, so I really love that. That idea of just taking that small step to go down to the shore, to go just a bit up the road on a clear day, when it would be clear if I just took the small step of opening. Yeah. Okay, so the next bit after assuming we can actually see something, the next bit is bearing it, isn't it? Is bearing what we see if it's difficult. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about both external and internal things. So just to start off by saying that I don't see that this is not a strength of mine, sort of bearing difficult things. And in fact, I've noticed in myself a real tendency, kind of deeply ingrained, very quick way that I can shut down difficult feelings, particularly. So difficult, anger, grief, it can be very quickly gone from my awareness. And no doubt that's related to a history I have of being maybe not as aware as I could have been, for sure, of we're not bearing with seeing difficult things externally. So what I'll talk about today specifically about that as an example is the climate crisis. But while I'm certainly not an expert at all in this area or good at it, it is a big area of interest for me and a big area of work. So I can share with you what I've noticed so far in working with it. And the number one thing I've noticed, which I feel like saying anytime I do a talk, is metta. Yeah, the number one thing has been metta and allowing to be able to bear things. And yeah, and first from others. So first allowing that metta in from other people, and then learning more and more to be able to do that for myself. And I've found that I can't sort of force difficult feelings to the surface on my timetable, much as I'd like to. And they require a very gentle touch. And they need freedom to come out as and when they're ready. And they need respect. And I think perhaps it's similar, maybe, with seeing difficult external realities as well. So again, for me particularly, with the climate crisis. So I think there was a way that I just hadn't let in the reality of that at all until maybe a couple of years ago. And I can almost pinpoint the moment when I did, and it was a Sangha Night that maybe some of you were at. I don't know, Karanavacha and Satchinama led it. And it was led with a ton of metta. It was, with a very much an allowing of where each of us was in relation to the crisis, in relation to what we, thought, felt about it. Allowing for that, and with a very respectful invitation to connect, to emotionally connect a bit with what it meant. And so there was a lot of metta. There was also Sangha, which I think is another key bit that's been helpful for me in being able to turn towards things and bear them is, that support of other people in the Sangha and the way that they can, support, allow me to feel things. So the third bit after bearing this witness is, that I'd like to talk about, is this idea of sort of standing firmly in that in some sort of way in relation to other people and sort of communicating that to whatever degree we can. So I just want to talk a bit about, again, this is something I have very little experience of, but I do have sort of one experience that I want to talk about, which is recently during COP26, which were these big climate talks that happened back in November. So I meditated in the market square every day for an hour with the Earth Sangha circle, the new circle here. So I felt really drawn to do that. And in sort of the couple of weeks leading up to the talks, I really wanted to do it. And I also felt fear around it. And I wanted to do it with others. I didn't want to do it on my own. And I was worried I wasn't going to be able to organize and get people to do it in enough time. And I had a conversation with Karanavacha. So this is, again, Sangha and the help of that. About a week before the talks, I think, because it was quite last minute when I was decided to actually, or I wanted to do it. And saying to Karanavacha, no, I think there's just not enough time. There's just not enough time to get this organized before. So, and I've got too much else going on. So no, I'm not going to do this. And she said to me, no, it's easy. This isn't that hard. And we can do this. She said, we can do this. It isn't that hard. And I remember I was so mad at her. I was like, you mean it's not hard, not hard for you, maybe. I've never done this before. So I'm so glad she did that, because I wouldn't have done it. I don't think if she hadn't kind of held, again, it's just a bit of bearing witness in that, actually. She sort of bore witness of me and what I could do. And she was like, yeah, you can do this, it's all right. So people did gather around. So I was never alone in those 14 days. I always had at least one other person with me, often a lot more. And it was such a strong practice. So I just want to share a bit about what that was like to meditate in the square. So it was having people pass, each with a different response to us. So a lot of times I had my eyes open and other people were meditating. But it was brilliant to be able to see what was happening. Some people would stop and talk for a bit, but they would all move on eventually. And they each had, just that variety that people have, right? That every person was different in their response and what they brought, each with their own flavor. So it felt like such a metaphor to me, really, for practice, for meditation, for like experiences that come, they go, they pass, they may stick with you for a bit, and then they move. And and it was such a wider experience than I would normally have in meditation in terms of what stimuli came through, and the people that I interacted with were a much wider group than I normally do. And so I don't know exactly what effect that had on the passersby. I do know that it had an effect on a lot of people, because I could see almost everybody who walked by, noticed us. And there was some kind of response, and there was some kind of, maybe they'd start talking to their friends about COP26. What's that? Like there'd be some sort of response. I have a slightly more of an idea of the effect it's had on me to do it. It just felt like a relief, actually, doing it. Something about being there just felt like this is just what I need to do right now. This is just what I need to do. There's something about it. I just need to stand here and say, without saying anything, I see this thing, I see this thing. Yeah, and it let me feel more connected with the wider world around me, for sure, to be able to have those interactions with other people. And it gave me some confidence in my ability to do such a thing. So I would like to do it some more. Look at me. I'm under 15 minutes. I told you, Paul. Okay. So it is Paul's go.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. So I think I want to start by saying what a pleasure it has been to work on this topic with Rachel. As she mentioned, I sort of came up with the idea first of all, but we began to explore it and quickly realized that we were coming at it from very different angles, but we met very firmly in the middle, and it's been a really interesting process. One of the things that we have talked about is how bearing witness relates to the story of the Buddha and the four sights. Now, I know that many people will be aware of this. I mean, the story of the four sights is pretty much in every introductory course, but just as a quick reminder, the Buddha, before he became the Buddha, as Gautama, as the prince, went out from his palace and witnessed four sights. He witnessed a sick person, an old person, a corpse, a dead person, but he also witnessed a holy man. And these four sights were really what prompted him to question existence and ultimately led him on his path to exploration and enlightenment. Now, interestingly, if you try to find the actual source, the story of the four sights, normally we'd look at the Pali Canon, but you won't find it there in the way that you might expect. The story is actually in something called the Mahapadana Sutta, and it's the Buddha himself who is describing the four sights as experienced by an earlier Buddha called Vipassi. And in this account, Vipassi, this earlier Buddha, actually went up to the fourth sight, to the holy man, and had a conversation with him. And I'm just going to share a few lines of that with you now. So Vipassi goes to the holy man, wondering who he is, and says, "You, master, what have you done that your head is not as other men's heads, nor your clothes as those of other men? I, my lord, am one who has gone forth." What, master, does that mean? It means, my lord, being thorough in the religious life, thorough in the peaceful life, thorough in good actions, thorough in meritorious conduct, thorough in harmlessness, thorough in kindness to all creatures. Excellently indeed, master, are you said to have gone forth, since so thorough is your conduct in all those respects. Then the Lord Vipassi, brethren, bade his charioteer, saying, "Come then, good charioteer, do you take the carriage and drive it hence back to my rooms. But I will even here cut off my hair and don the yellow robe, and go forth from the house into the homeless state." "Yea, my lord," replied the charioteer, and drove back. But the Lord Vipassi there and then, cutting off his hair and donning the yellow robe, went forth from the house into the homeless state. So whether the story relates to us in terms of the historical Buddha, the Shakyamuni, or another Buddha, the point is that the effect of the fourth sight was profound. It's quite likely that the way the story is told didn't happen quite like that, but it's what that story represents which is really important. The first three sights that the Buddha experienced helped the Buddha to be see the truth of human conditioning, and that is suffering. But the fourth sight represented the way out of suffering, or liberation. Now, for us, the thought of complete transformation in an instant, in the sense that you see it in that story with the Buddha to be, through a single encounter, or may seem improbable, but actually, even for us, behaviors, actions, or just the presence of a person who has some sort of higher quality, or something that we that piques our interest, can in a split second have a profound effect on us at a conscious or an unconscious level. One story I want to share with you is of when I felt this happened to me to an extent. I was in a play, and actors can be a bit of an unpleasant bunch at sometimes. And there's one guy in this play who behaved a bit oddly. He wasn't a bad person. He behaved a bit strangely, and some people objected to the way he behaved, and he became the focus of a lot of attention. And at every opportunity, the actors would tend to sort of say, "Oh, guess what he did this time," that sort of attitude. And I remember noticing this one guy called Alan, and he just remained silent. And it had such a deep effect on me that he didn't feel the need to engage in this banter about this other person. He clearly didn't agree necessarily, and I don't think I did with what was being said, but I was kind of going along with it, and he didn't. And his silence had a real profound effect on me, because it made me see that, oh, actually, I don't have to go along with this. I do have a choice. I could do something else. And of course, after enlightenment, there are numerous accounts of people becoming enlightened simply by being in the presence of the Buddha. There's a sutta called the Bahia Sutra, somebody called Bahia of the Bark Cloth. And he was a kind of holy man himself. And he was had been made aware of the fact that actually he wasn't an arahant. He wasn't somebody clearly on the path to enlightenment, but he heard that the Buddha was in the area. So he went to see the Buddha, and the Buddha was on his arms round. And the Buddha, generally the rule was you don't disturb the Buddha when he's on his arms round, but Bahia was quite persistent, asking the Buddha to teach him the Dharma. And after the third time, which is often the traditional way, that after the third time of asking the Buddha, he will give you a response. He did. And this is how he responds to Bahia. He said, "Then, Bahia, you should train yourself thus. In the seen will be merely the seen. In the heard will be merely what is heard. In the sensed will be merely what is sensed. In the cognized will be merely what is cognized. In this way you should train yourself. Then, Bahia, you are not in that. When you are not in that, then you will be neither here, nor beyond, nor between the two. Just this is the end of suffering." And there's a little commentary here which comes from the book Gautama Buddha by Vishvapani, which goes on to describe the experience the Bahia had. "A sudden moment of communion cocoons the men beyond time or place, and something happens in Bahia. Exactly what is hard to say, but its effect is shattering. It is bound up with the meaning of Gautama's words, but that meaning is mixed with a sense that Gautama himself embodies them completely and has inwardly expanded into the open spaces they disclose. A shift occurs deep in Bahia's consciousness, a silent opening, and then the moment is over." So what the Buddha was trying to convey to Bahia is that experiences are just experiences, and seeing that there is no you in them is the practice which Bahia was affected so deeply by. And this sense of being out of time, or time standing still, is perhaps one that you may be able to relate to and experience yourself. Something which has had a profound effect on you in the moment. And it seems like it's a timeless moment. Something has just shifted in that moment. So the Buddha was deeply affected by the sight, the fourth sight, the sight of the holy man, and also was a fourth sight, affected others himself by his very presence and what he spoke. So what exactly is the fourth sight? Let's have a think about this now. So if the first three sights are a clearer understanding of dukkha, of suffering, the human condition of dissatisfaction, the fourth sight is a promise of an alternative. It's a shift in our awareness. Now, our president of Nottingham, Ratnagosha, has given a very good talk on which is available on Free Buddhist Audio. It's from a couple of years ago. And it describes the experience of having a fourth sight as being a glimpse at a higher self, creating an impetus to undertake the only work that is truly worthy of human consciousness, the work of becoming more aware. So we're going to encourage you in a few moments to think about what brought you to a Buddhist path. Presumably for all of us, we're here in one way or another because we have had some degree of dissatisfaction in our life and we've been looking for some alternative. We've been looking for a different way. But we're going to encourage you to have a think about what were the moments, the people, the events, the thoughts which ultimately brought you to where you are now with your Buddhist practice, however recent or long-standing that may be. There are three people that come to mind who have had this impact on me, I would say. I think quite possibly the first Buddhist I ever met was Artabandhu. It was either Artabandhu or Paragar, I can't quite remember, but it would have been at a drop-in probably about 8 years ago now. And the thing that struck me about Artabandhu is he wasn't what I expected a Buddhist to be at all. He was very warm and friendly, and he communicated in a way that I could really relate to. But he was really funny. He's always made me laugh. And that surprised me. It challenged my view of what a Buddhist was. The second one was Jyotada. And I think it was at a retreat, actually. I seem to remember we were washing up and he told me how he was a GFR Mitra, and I didn't know what that was. I had no idea what a Mitra was, but he explained that this is that he had asked for ordination, that he had started on the path to fully commit his life to going for refuge to the Three Jewels. And Jyotada had a lot of similarities with me, and I think that made me make comparisons and really sort of spark something for me to consider about my own life. And the third one was Satchamega. Now, Satchamega I knew from many, many years ago in a different capacity. And we bumped into each other at a Sangha Night. And I said, oh, so lovely to see you again. What are you doing now? What are you doing for work? And she told me that she wasn't working at the time. And I was taken aback a little bit by that. That's an odd thing, isn't it? Why is she not working? That's very strange. Didn't say that, obviously, but that was kind of my thought process. And for all of those, I realize now looking back, those interactions, how they were in those moments have had quite a profound effect on me and where I am now. I'm now a Buddhist, I'm now a GFR Mitra, and I'm also not working at the moment. And I wouldn't have thought those things possible, but there's no doubt in my mind that those people acted in a sense as a fourth sight for me. They helped me to see something different, a different way that my life could work out. So I left my job at the end of September. I'm not currently working at the moment, and I got a rather lovely card signed by all my team from the job where I'd been for almost 7 years. And one person put in my card, "Thank you for everything you've taught me." And that wasn't my job, really. You know, I was her manager, but I was really touched by that. The fact that I'd impacted on her in a way that I'd not recognized. And I think it made me realize that all of the time we are impacting on other people, we are affecting other people, often, without us really knowing it. And of course, that can be positively and negatively. Interestingly, when I left my job, it was only around about the time I left that I started to talk at any great length about being a Buddhist. One of the reasons that I wanted to create this space was to deepen my practice, to do a few more retreats, to meditate a bit more, and not have to worry about fitting that in around work and holidays and things. And I kind of reflect on why I didn't explore that more, why I didn't discuss the fact that I'm a Buddhist more, not only with them, but with family, with friends. I'm not embarrassed about being a Buddhist, but there's something which holds me back. And it did make me think that, well, actually, if I was a little bit more open about my chosen path, what impact that would have or could have had on other people. Now, if you've been coming along to Sangha Nights in the run up to Christmas, you will be aware that we had several sessions on the movement in India and Dr. Ambedkar. And Dr. Ambedkar continues to be a huge inspiration for me. I see him as someone who took incredible risks, putting himself in the situations that he did. But with his education and standing, he could have lived a very comfortable life. But through his actions, he was the example from which hundreds of thousands of the most downtrodden people in Indian society were given hope and the vision of a better life. Most notably in converting himself to Buddhism in front of other people, and then converting other people to Buddhism as well. What he's doing was bearing witness to the power of the Dharma and the potential of what Buddhism offers. And I'm almost at the end of my talk, and I've not mentioned bearing witness. So bearing witness, I quite like I looked up a few definitions, and the one I like is to show that something exists or is true. And Ratnagosha, in his talk that I referred to earlier, suggests that after we've been inspired by a fourth sight, our task is to create liberation for ourselves and others by knowing the Dharma, embodying the Dharma, and being the Dharma. To be where you are, here and now, you're likely to have seen the Dharma at work in somebody. It may not even be a Buddhist. The Dharma can be witnessed in all sorts of situations, but something has stirred you and brought you to this stage of a path. And it's really important to get those sources of inspiration alive. As the Buddha himself did, you can know, embody, and be the Dharma in your own way. And in so doing, alter the course of other people's lives. I really believe that. And this is what creates community. We all can turn to a community that we can all turn to and thrive in. And in the words of the threefold puja, as one by one we make our own commitment, an ever widening circle the Sangha grows. So those are my reflections on bearing witness. What we're going to do in a moment is we're going to go into breakout groups, and we're going to invite you to explore some of the topics that we've been talked about. There are a couple of general questions that you might want to start with. And the first one is, who or what first inspired you to explore a Buddhist path? Or in other words, who or what was kind of your personal fourth sight, the thing that had an impact on you and gave you an impetus to explore further. And the second one is to consider whether you bear witness as a Buddhist, whether you call yourself a Buddhist or not, but do you bear witness for what you're practicing, what you're doing? Do you openly talk about your practice or keep it a secret for others? And what sort of impact could it have if you were that fourth sight for other people? So I will leave that there. I'll just check it.